A veteran NASCAR crew chief sat down decades later with a piece of scrap metal in his hands, machined 30-some years earlier, and said something that should stop you cold. NASCAR finally figured out what we were doing. They made us weld them. Weld what? A part so small it doesn't even show up as a separate item on most engine diagrams. A restrictor plate slider engineered to fit exactly inside the boundaries of NASCAR's own rulebook, worth roughly 50 horsepower on a superspeedway, using nothing but airflow itself to hold it in place. This is how it worked, in the words of the man who built it. Restrictor plates exist for one reason. Superspeedways, like Daytona and Talladega, let cars run fast enough, in a big enough pack, that a single mistake could turn into a multi-car catastrophe at nearly 200 miles an hour. NASCAR's answer was a thin metal plate bolted between the carburetor and the intake manifold, punched with holes small enough to choke down how much air and fuel an engine could pull through at once. Less airflow means less horsepower, and, in theory, less horsepower means a slower, safer pack of cars. The rule governing it, in his own words, required a specific diameter hole in the center of the intake manifold, with a 1-inch block sitting on top of that, down into the plenum, the chamber, where air actually mixes before it reaches the cylinders. That's the exact wording, not a general instruction to limit airflow. A specific hole, a specific block, in a specific place. On paper, that sounds like it should have closed the door completely. NASCAR had already measured the plate itself down to a specific hole size. Most people in the garage assumed there simply wasn't any more power left to find on the other side of it, that the plate was the plate, and everyone was stuck with whatever came through it. We figured out it wasn't anything different that we could make, he said, meaning nothing that violated the rule as written. And if we go up against the restrictor plate, it's about 50 horsepower, doing that because it straightened the air coming through the plate and pulled more as it straightened it up. Here's why that's possible, even with a plate that measures exactly legal. A restrictor plate works by choking airflow down to a specific volume that's the entire point of the rule. But air moving through a restricted opening doesn't travel in a perfectly straight line on its own. It tumbles, it swirls, and it wastes some of its own energy fighting itself on the way through. A precisely shaped insert, positioned exactly right against that opening, straightens the airflow out before it hits the restriction, turning wasted turbulence into usable velocity. Same hole, same plate. More air actually making it through, purely because of the shape guiding it there. On an engine making somewhere around 400 horsepower, under restrictor plate rules, 50 extra horsepower isn't a rounding error, it's more than a 10% gain. On a track where the difference between winning and finishing mid-pack is often a fraction of a second at the finish line. That kind of edge shows up exactly where it matters most on a superspeedway. At the end of the longest straightaway, at the exact moment one car is trying to draft past another. This was built in his own shop sometime in the mid-1980s, working almost entirely alone. Asked years later if anyone had helped him figure it out, he was blunt. Just him, on his own time, on a bench. And by his own account, the idea didn't come from studying the engine at all, it came from reading the rule itself, closely enough to notice exactly what it didn't say. If you hold these two guidelines, he said, this is legal. He wasn't reverse engineering a part someone else had built. He was reading a legal document the way a lawyer would, looking for the exact edge of what it actually prohibited. The first versions needed help to stay in place. We could pull that up with the carburetor studs. He explained an early piece bolted into position using the same hardware holding the carburetor down, tensioned into place by hand before each run. Then, his team found something better, almost by accident. The airspeed coming through those holes was so fast that it would push itself up against the plate, he said. So we didn't need any kind of tricks. No hydraulics, no motors, no moving parts an inspector could look for and flag. A third design went further still, using a rod set at an angle and threaded into the side of the piece, tighten it down with the carburetor already in place, and the rod pulled everything up tight against the plate mechanically, with no airflow required to seat it. 3 completely different approaches to the same 50 horsepower problem, refined one after another over what he described as countless hours on the floor, on the bench, and on the dyno. Decades later, being interviewed in his own shop, he still had several of these parts sitting on a shelf, pulling them down and turning them over on camera, pointing out exactly where the machining sat and where a rod or spring had once threaded through. He'd simply never gotten around to throwing them out. That work paid off in a moment he still remembered clearly decades later. He described arriving at a 3-day manufacturer test at Talladega, paid for by Pontiac, with other teams already 2.5 days into their running by the time his own car showed up around midday on the final day. The piece finally dialed in close to where he wanted it. His team ran 2.5 laps. They came back 3 miles an hour faster than anything anyone else had turned in over the entire 2.5 days before them. They loaded the car back up and went home immediately, nothing left to learn. No reason to let anyone else see more of what the car could do. He wasn't alone in working toward this idea, either, even if he built his own version independently. Asked later how word of this kind of trick started spreading through the garage, he was clear that he'd worked it out himself, from the rulebook, rather than copying anyone. But the way the question was asked and the way he answered it makes clear this wasn't a single genius secret. Other shops in that era were separately chasing the same gap in the same rule, arriving at their own versions of a similar answer around the same time. NASCAR eventually caught on not by finding one specific team's part on a track, but by recognizing the category of part itself once they knew to look for it. And it's worth being precise about exactly what NASCAR did in response, because it's a more interesting answer than a simple ban. His own words describe them making teams weld the pieces in place, permanently fixing them so they could no longer be adjusted, removed, or replaced between runs. That's not the same as NASCAR standing up and declaring the part illegal after the fact. It's NASCAR closing the specific gap in the rules wording that had made the part legal in the first place, forcing every car to run the same fixed, unadjustable setup going forward, which quietly ended the trick's usefulness without necessarily rewriting the history of any race that had already happened. His own account of exactly whose car finally got caught elsewhere in the same conversation is honest about how uncertain his memory of that detail actually is. He recalls a car that won 2 Cup races, outrunning Davey Allison, using similar sliders that weren't legal, then getting caught at the next race, at Daytona in February, after a disgruntled employee tipped off NASCAR. Asked which team it was, he corrected himself out loud, mid-sentence. So, was it McClure? No. This is actually McClure, I think. Treat that specific detail as one man's half-remembered recollection of a team that wasn't his own, not a confirmed record. I found no independent record, no technical bulletin, no period race report, no separate confirmation of that specific incident. It rests entirely on his memory, decades after the fact. What is fully confirmed, from his own direct account of his own equipment, is that NASCAR eventually identified this category of part and forced his team specifically to weld theirs permanently in place. He described one related trick from years earlier, aimed at the same restriction from a different angle, run by a different team entirely. A car connected to Bobby Isaac's operation at an early Daytona 500 made its own gasket for the restrictor plate only 1/10 of an inch thick, the same diameter as the plate itself, but with the inside edge deliberately radiused instead of left sharp. That rounded edge was worth roughly 25 horsepower on its own, simply by giving the air a smoother direction to travel through, instead of catching on a hard, square edge. NASCAR's response, once they figured it out, was to stop letting teams supply their own gaskets at all, and furnish everyone themselves from then on the same underlying fix as the welding. Not a retroactive ruling, but a change to who controlled the part going forward. 2 tricks, years and teams apart, attacking the same restriction from 2 directions, one reshaping the air before the plate, one reshaping the edge the air passed, through both exploiting the same gap. A rule specific enough to name an exact hole diameter, but not specific enough to account for every possible shape of metal sitting near it. What makes this worth telling isn't just the ingenuity. It's the honesty of how it was built, not smuggled in secretly, not hidden behind a fake panel, but engineered specifically to satisfy a rule's exact wording while defeating everything the rule was written to prevent. NASCAR wrote a hole diameter and a block height into its rulebook and never wrote down what shape the space immediately around them was allowed to be. A crew chief with enough hours on a bench and a dyno found the exact edge of that sentence, built a piece of metal that lived precisely on top of it, and 30-some years later, that same piece was still sitting on a shelf in his shop, close enough to reach without standing up. NASCAR eventually rewrote the rule. The metal itself never had to change at all, it just stopped being useful once welding took away the one thing that had made it work. Subscribe if you want more of these, the tricks nobody built to be found, told by the people who actually built them.